I think he's had an excellent spring, Anthony. I mean, the past 8 to 10 weeks, and really probably beyond that, really the past 6 months with, as a rookie player, and particularly at quarterback, you learn a lot your first year, and especially if you don't start a full season, start 6, 7, or I guess you start 7 games, and you kind of go through the year. It's adjustment going to the NFL, and then you get a chance to catch your breath and say, okay, well, here are the things that I need to work on, here are the things I need to learn. And I think he did a phenomenal job this offseason. That really started in January and February.
The Cleveland Browns have already made their decision at quarterback. They just haven't announced it yet. In the strange part, the guy everyone assumed was the answer, Deshaun Watson, still hasn't fully practiced, still hasn't commanded a room, still hasn't erased with the last 2 years burned into every person inside that building. Meanwhile, a 5th-round pick who was literally 4th on the depth chart 8 months ago is being described by the general manager of an NFL franchise as phenomenal. Not promising, not surprising, phenomenal. And when you hear exactly how Andrew Berry chose to talk about Shedeur Sanders, the words he used, the words he avoided, and the one moment in that interview where the front office mask slipped, you're going to wonder why nobody is saying this out loud. Because I think they already know.
And then you get a chance to catch your breath and say, okay, well, here are the things that I need to work on, here are the things I need to learn. And I think he did a phenomenal job this offseason. That really started in January and February. And then certainly as we got into having, real practices in May, his growth has been tremendous. So we're all very excited to see, Shedeur's, fall camp, preseason, things of that nature when we get into padded situations, live situations.
To understand what's happening right now in Berea, Ohio, you have to go back to one specific moment. Not the injury, not the suspension, not the trade that cost Cleveland $230 million and 3 years of organizational credibility. The moment was quieter than that. It was the 3rd quarter of a forgettable regular season game, the kind of game where you look at the scoreboard and you stop watching with your eyes and start watching with your gut. And the gut said, he's not coming back from this. Deshaun Watson had thrown for 169 yards. He looked like a man playing football underwater. The Browns faithful didn't boo. That would have required caring. They went quiet in that particular Cleveland way that tells you something has already been decided. The crowd just hasn't been told yet.
Yeah, Deshaun Watson is the other guy in the competition here, Andrew. If all goes well with him and he wins this competition and he plays well for the Browns this fall, do you see a world where he is the Browns quarterback into the future, and are you open to giving him a contract extension?
Yeah, I think everything's on the table. I think it would be silly to go into a season and say, hey, something.
And the front office absorbed that. They absorbed 3 years of it. The op-eds, the radio segments, the national narrative that Cleveland had done it again. Swung big, missed completely, and handed a disaster a guaranteed contract worth $250 million. That wound is still open. It never fully closed, and everything happening right now, every rep Shedeur Sanders takes, every phenomenal that Andrew Berry lets slip in an interview, exists inside that wound. That's what this quarterback competition is really about. It's not about talent evaluation, it's about survival, and one of these two men has something to prove. The other one already proved it. Let's start with what we can see. Shedeur Sanders went from 5th-round pick to 4th-string quarterback to legitimate starter conversation in under 12 months. That trajectory doesn't happen by accident in the NFL. Organizations do not build a public narrative around a backup unless they want the narrative to exist. Every rep he's taken with the ones, every time a camera caught him commanding the huddle, that's not organic. That's orchestrated.
All right, well, one of the quarterbacks, Shedeur Sanders, has gone from the 5th-rounder to 4th-string to now a legitimate chance to compete for a starting job. So what can you say about his trajectory and his rise through the program?
I think he's had an excellent spring, Anthony. I mean, the past 8 to 10 weeks, and really probably beyond that, really the past 6 months with, as a rookie player, and particularly a quarterback, you learn a lot your first year, and especially if you don't start a full season started.
And Barry confirmed it without confirming it. He said Shedeur's growth since January has been tremendous. He said the team is very excited to watch him in camp and preseason. He said his development truly has been phenomenal. 3 separate emotional endorsements for a 5th-round pick in a spring that's not supposed to count. When was the last time you heard a general manager call a developmental backup phenomenal and spend more time talking about him than the $230 million starter? Barry was asked directly, is Deshaun Watson the future in Cleveland? Could he see an extension? His answer was, everything's on the table. I wouldn't rule out anything. That is the language of a man keeping a door open he has no intention of walking through. When organizations believe in a quarterback, truly believe, they don't say everything's on the table. They say we're building around him. They say he's our guy. They say the thing that removes doubt.
Barry said the opposite of that. He dressed it up in flexibility language, but what he communicated to anyone who's ever sat in a negotiation or listened to a front office try to manage a situation was, we are not committing to this man's future. And then there's the way he talked about Watson versus Sanders. Watson got qualifications. He got everything we know about him and everything he's worked through. He got the careful, measured, liability-aware language of an organization that has a complicated relationship with a player they still have to pay. Shedeur got emotion. He got specifics. He got a timeline. January, February, May. He got truly. He got phenomenal. Words are data, and the data points somewhere. 5th-round quarterbacks, picks 150 and beyond, almost never start in year 2. The average 5th-round QB in the modern NFL era starts fewer than 2 games across their entire career. The ones who break through that ceiling don't break through because they're talented. They break through because someone in that building decided to let them break through. That decision has already been made in Cleveland. The spring is where you confirm it, not where you make it. Now here's where people are going to disagree with me, and that's fine, because what I'm about to say isn't about football talent. It's about the psychology of what happens when an organization puts 2 quarterbacks in a room and calls it a competition, when one of them already knows he's losing.
Most people watching this competition are evaluating arm talent, release timing, decision-making under pressure. That's not the real competition. The real competition already ended, and it ended in January, in a film room, when the coaches watched Shedeur work and quietly stopped comparing him to the backup and started comparing him to the starter. Think about identity threat for a second. When a player's entire self-concept, their worth, their career, their legacy is tied to a role they might lose, the body responds before the brain processes it. You see it in the shoulders first, then the eyes, then the way a man walks into a facility he used to own and stands in a hallway he used to fill. Watson has been through enough that he understands what a real competition feels like. And a real competition doesn't produce 3 endorsements of the other guy from the GM in a single radio interview.
Now look at Shedeur's psychology. This is a man who is publicly underestimated at every turn. 5th round, overlooked, depth chart afterthought. What does that do to a competitor? It builds a specific kind of hunger that you cannot coach into a player. The perceived locus of control for Shedeur Sanders is entirely internal. He doesn't believe he's in this situation by accident. He believes he earned his way here. And that belief, that particular flavor of certainty, is something coaches feel walking into a huddle. And then there's the organizational psychology. Barry even acknowledged it without meaning to. He said the owner's public comments, the swing and miss remarks, don't play a factor in how they evaluate the roster. But he said it defensively, quickly, like a man who's thought about that question before and has a prepared answer ready. When something truly doesn't affect your decision-making, you don't need to explain that it doesn't. You just make the decision. Let me translate what Andrew Berry has been saying. Not in this interview, but across this entire offseason. Because organizations don't announce decisions, they signal them. And once you know the code, you can't unhear it. When Barry said we really did a lot of work with the offensive infrastructure, not just the scheme, but the players around the quarterback position, that's not an observation about the roster. That's a sentence designed to make Shedeur Sanders look competent regardless of what happens in August. He's preloading the context. He's building the room around a specific player before that player has been officially named the starter. When he said the spring is an install and developmental period, that's not coach speak deflection. That's an organization protecting a young quarterback from premature public scrutiny. You don't protect a backup, you protect an investment. But to understand why this matters, we have to go back to when Cleveland first drafted Shedeur in the 5th round. That pick was treated as a reach by most analysts, a consolation prize, a developmental flyer on a famous last name. But think about what Andrew Berry said about player evaluation on character and trajectory. The most important thing is what they do from here. He said that about a different player, but that philosophy applies everywhere he builds. He doesn't draft consolation prizes. He drafts what he believes in and builds a story around it later. For this season, if the evidence points where I think it points, if Shedeur Sanders is the Week 1 starter in Cleveland, this team is not a contender in the traditional sense, but they are dangerous in a different way. They are a young, attacking defense headlined by Jared Verse and one of the strongest secondaries in the AFC. They are a team with nothing to lose and a quarterback who plays that way. Barry said it directly, you never really know how it's going to go. He mentioned New England in the Super Bowl. He mentioned Jacksonville winning 13 games. He didn't say those things to fill airtime. He said them to manage expectations downward while building belief upward. That is the move of a man preparing his fan base for a surprise. And 3 years from now, when we look back at this moment, this is where it either began or where we find out that the wound was too deep to heal with one pick, that the franchise chose correctly or chose desperately, that a 5th-round quarterback either became the thing Cleveland needed or became another name in a long list of things that almost worked. But right now, in June, the evidence says they believe. At the top of this, I told you the Browns have already made their decision. They've just chosen not to announce it. After everything you just heard, the language, the endorsements, the careful silences around Watson, the deliberate emotion around Sanders, tell me I'm wrong. Because underneath all of this, past the depth charts and the press conference answers and the contract language and the OTA rep counts, there is a 22-year-old kid from a famous family who nobody took in the first 4 rounds, who was told in the clearest way the NFL knows how to tell a player something that he wasn't good enough, who showed up to a city that has spent decades learning to love something that breaks their heart and decided to make that city believe in him anyway. That story doesn't have an ending yet, but in Cleveland, they're starting to write one. So here's what I want to know from you. Is Shedeur Sanders a legitimate NFL starter who's been building toward this moment all year? Or is Cleveland about to make the same mistake they've been making for 3 decades, just with a cheaper price tag? Drop it below. I'll be reading every single one.